On a rainy autumn night in New York City, the vibrant lights of the city reflected off the puddles scattered across the sidewalks. The sound of cars rushing by and honking horns mixed with the constant patter of rain hitting the asphalt. Among the towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, one man stood out in the urban scene: John Stevens. John was a respected billionaire and owner of a chain of luxury hotels that spanned the country. Tall, with well-groomed gray hair and always impeccably dressed, John carried an aura of power and confidence. However, behind this facade of success was a man marked by a humble and challenging past. It was precisely this past that made him a dedicated philanthropist, always seeking ways to give back to society what he had achieved. That night, John was on his way to an awards ceremony where he would be honored for his philanthropic contributions. His private driver, Henry, drove through the city with the expertise of someone who knew every shortcut and street. Inside the car, John mentally reviewed his speech, thinking of the right words to inspire and motivate the audience. But then something caught his attention. Looking out the car window, John saw a young woman, completely soaked, holding a baby in her arms. They were under the awning of a closed shop, trying to shelter from the torrential rain. The baby, wrapped in wet blankets, was crying incessantly, while the woman, with desperate eyes and an exhausted expression, tried to soothe him. This sight made John's heart tighten. He remembered his own childhood when he and his mother struggled against poverty, often with no place to sleep. The image of that woman and her baby brought back all his memories of pain and despair. John knew he couldn't ignore that scene. Without a second thought, he asked Henry to stop the car. Under the heavy rain, he stepped out of the vehicle and walked over to the woman. His voice, usually firm and authoritative, came out soft and full of compassion. "Please let me help you. Come with me." The woman looked at him with distrust, hesitating to accept the offer from a stranger. John, sensing her hesitation, took off his coat and placed it over her shoulders, shielding her somewhat from the rain. "My name is John Stevens. I have a safe place where you can stay. You don't need to be afraid." The sincerity in his eyes and the urgency in his voice made the woman, still hesitant, accept the help. Carefully, John guided her to the car, and Henry immediately headed towards John's mansion. Inside the car, the baby finally stopped crying, warmed by John's coat. The woman, who revealed her name to be Emily, was visibly relieved but still carried the shadow of years of suffering. John knew this was just the first of many steps in the journey they were about to embark on together. The car glided silently through the streets until it reached the imposing mansion of John Stevens. When they arrived, Emily and the baby were ushered into the warm and luxurious interior of the house. The opulence of the place was a stark contrast to the misery she had faced until then. Emily's eyes, still wary, took in every detail of the surroundings while she held her son tightly. She was still trying to comprehend how she had ended up there, feeling out of place amidst such luxury. John, noticing Emily's tension, decided to share a bit of his own story to build a bridge of trust. They sat in a cozy room, with a fireplace gently crackling in the background. "I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, Emily," he began, his voice low and sincere. "My mother worked as a housemaid, and I helped her from a very young age. We barely had enough to eat. I remember nights when we slept on the streets because we couldn't afford the rent." Emily looked at him surprised. It was hard to imagine that this successful man had a story so similar to hers. John continued, recounting how his mother, despite all the adversities, never gave up fighting for a better life for them. He had worked tirelessly, seized every opportunity, until he finally managed to open his first hotel. "It was tough, but I managed to get out of that life. And now I want to help you do the same." John looked directly into Emily's eyes, his determination clear. Despite John's generous gesture, life in the mansion wouldn't be easy for Emily. She would face challenges that would test her strength and determination at every step. The household staff, accustomed to serving a billionaire, viewed Emily with suspicion and often with disdain. Whispers and judgmental glances were constant, intensifying the sense of inadequacy she felt. On the first morning, while having breakfast with John, Emily overheard a whispered conversation between two maids. "I don't understand why Mr. Stevens brought this woman here. I bet she's just another opportunist." These words hurt more than any physical hardship she had faced. Emily kept her head high, but inside she felt crushed by the prejudice. "John, noticing the tension, began thinking of ways to integrate Emily more effectively into his life. He decided that the best way to help her regain her self-esteem was to offer her a job, a means for her to rebuild her life with dignity. John offered Emily a job at one of his hotels, a proposal she accepted with gratitude, albeit with a touch of fear. She knew she would have to face even more challenges, but she was determined to prove her worth. However, life at the hotel brought new conflicts. Co-workers looked at her with skepticism and often disdain, believing she was only there because of her relationship with John. One day, while cleaning one of the luxury rooms, Emily found a letter addressed to John. It was from an unscrupulous competitor, threatening to ruin his reputation and his business if he didn't back off from a major acquisition he was about to make. The threat was clear and direct, something that could destroy not only John's career, but also the newfound security Emily had. This discovery brought an unexpected twist to the plot. Emily, scared and concerned, knew she had to tell John about the letter. At the same time, the shadow of her ex-boyfriend, who was beginning to reappear in her life, brought painful and confusing memories, further complicating her situation. Emily held the letter in her trembling hands, her heart racing as the threatening words echoed in her mind. The responsibility of telling John felt overwhelming, but she knew she couldn't hide something so serious. That night after dinner, she asked him to talk. They were in the mansion's library, a cozy room with dark wood-paneled walls and a fireplace casting a soft, warm glow. Emily, still nervous, took a deep breath and handed the letter to John. He read it in silence, his expression hardening with each line. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with an almost palpable tension. "I didn't know what to do, John. I thought you needed to know," Emily said, her voice almost a whisper. John looked up from the letter, his expression serious but grateful. "You did the right thing, Emily. Thank you for telling me." He knew this threat couldn't be ignored. John began making calls, mobilizing his lawyers and personal security. The atmosphere in the mansion changed drastically. A sense of urgency and danger hung in the air. Meanwhile, Emily tried to focus on her work at the hotel. Every day was a challenge. The suspicious glances from her colleagues and the malicious whispers were constant, but she pushed herself to prove her worth. The work was hard, but it gave her a sense of purpose and dignity she hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, while cleaning one of the luxury rooms, she overheard a conversation between two colleagues. "I heard she's only here because she's having an affair with the boss." The voice was full of disdain. "Oh, that explains a lot. Let's see how long she lasts before she gets kicked out." A dry laugh followed. The words cut deeply, but Emily used them as fuel to work even harder. She knew she needed to prove herself, not just to others but to herself. But then a new complication arose. Emily received a message from her ex-boyfriend, Mark. He claimed to be remorseful and wanted to see the baby, insisting that he deserved a second chance. Mark's return brought back a wave of conflicting emotions: fear, anger, and a part of her that still felt tied to the past. On impulse, she decided to meet Mark at a cafe near the hotel. When she saw him, he looked like the same man who had hurt her so many times, but his words were soft and apologetic. "Emily, I've changed. I want to be part of our child's life," Mark said, his eyes seemingly sincere. Emily, torn, knew she needed to think about what was best for her child. John was concerned when he found out about the meeting, fearing for Emily and the baby's safety. The tension between them grew, as John saw Mark as a threat to Emily's well-being. "Emily, you know he's not trustworthy. I just want to protect you," John spoke, his voice laden with concern and frustration. "I know, John, but he's the father of my child. I need to give him a chance to show if he's really changed." Emily was firm, but inside she felt confused and fearful. This situation brought a new conflict to Emily and John's relationship, testing the trust and loyalty they were beginning to build. Mark's presence was a shadow that threatened not only the stability Emily was trying to achieve, but also the growing affection between her and John. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Emily tried to balance her job, caring for the baby, and dealing with the conflicting emotions that Mark stirred up. John, in turn, struggled to protect his business from the external threat, while trying to support Emily as best he could. And so the plot thickened, leaving everyone wondering, what would come next? Could Emily overcome the shadows of her past and build a new life? And would John be able to protect those he loved and keep his empire intact? Emily was torn between the safety and stability John offered and Mark's promises of remorse. The nights became long and lonely as she pondered the future of her child and her own life. Doubts gnawed at her, and the tension between her and John only grew. One night, John found her in the living room, sitting in the dark, holding a photo of the baby. The faint light from the fireplace was the only source of warmth in the cold room. John approached silently and sat beside her, feeling the anguish emanating from her body. "Emily, I know this is hard, but you don't have to face it alone," John said softly, trying to meet her eyes. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I just want what's best for my son, and I'm so scared of making the wrong decision." John took her hand, a silent connection that spoke more than words could express. "You have to follow your heart, but know that I am here by your side no matter what." This intimate conversation brought a new layer of understanding between them. Their mutual trust strengthened, and Emily began to see John not just as a benefactor, but as a true friend and ally. Days later, Emily had to deal with a new crisis at the hotel. A prominent guest made a formal complaint about the service, putting the entire staff on alert. Emily, still new in her position, was called to resolve the issue. She took a deep breath and decided to face the situation with determination. The guest, an elegant and demanding woman, was furious about an error in her breakfast order. Emily, with a calm and controlled voice, sincerely apologized and offered a quick and effective solution. Her ability to handle the crisis did not go unnoticed. John, who was observing everything closely, felt a quiet pride growing within him. Later, he called her to a private meeting in his office. The room, decorated with mahogany furniture and heavy drapes, reflected John's authority and success. He stood up from his chair and walked over to her, a sincere smile on his lips. "You did an excellent job today, Emily," he said, his eyes shining with admiration. Emily smiled shyly, feeling a wave of pride and relief. "I just wanted to make sure the guest had a good experience. And you did. I'm impressed with how you handled the situation." John stepped closer, his presence warm and comforting. "I knew you were capable." With each passing day, Emily felt more integrated into life at the mansion and the hotel. However, the shadow of Mark continued to loom over her. He insisted on wanting a second chance, but his erratic behavior and violent past did not inspire trust. Emily was in a constant state of alert, trying to protect her child from any threat. One day, as she returned home after a long shift, she found Mark waiting outside the hotel. Her heart raced and she felt a wave of panic. Mark looked different, darker, and more determined. "Emily, we need to talk," he insisted, his voice firm and relentless. "Not here, Mark." She tried to stay calm, but her body was trembling. "Let's go somewhere more private." They headed to a nearby coffee, where they sat at a table in the back, away from prying eyes. The conversation that followed was tense and laden with emotions. Mark pleaded for a chance, promising he would change and be a present father. "I know I've made mistakes, Emily, but I love our son and want to be part of his life." Mark's voice was heavy with emotion, but Emily knew she couldn't trust him blindly. "Mark, you need to prove that you've changed. I can't put my son at risk." The decision was made, but it didn't make the situation any less painful. Meanwhile, John, concerned for Emily's safety, decided to hire additional security to protect the mansion and its occupants. He knew Mark's presence was a constant threat and was determined to protect Emily and the baby at any cost. That night, back at the mansion, Emily felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The tension with Mark hadn't been fully resolved, but John's constant presence and support were an invaluable source of comfort. They sat together in the garden, under the stars, and Emily finally began to relax. "Thank you, John, for everything," she said, her voice soft and full of gratitude. "You don't need to thank me, Emily. We're in this together," John replied, holding her hand. Their relationship continued to strengthen, but both knew the challenges were far from over. The external and internal threats continued to test their limits, but the trust and mutual support they shared were a constant light in the darkness. That night, the sound of rain gently tapping against the windows of John's mansion provided a constant and comforting melody. Emily was in the kitchen preparing a bottle for the baby, while John watched from a safe distance, concerned. The newly hired security guards patrolled the property, their dark figures visible through the illuminated windows. The tension was always present, a silent shadow hovering over the house. Emily felt the pressure on her shoulders, the constant worry about her son's safety, and the uncertainty about the future with Mark still lurking. However, she also felt a growing sense of protection and affection coming from John, something she had never experienced before. As she fed the baby, Emily found herself thinking about Mark's words. Part of her wanted to believe that he had changed, but the fear of repeating past mistakes was strong. She knew she needed to keep her son safe, and that meant keeping Mark at a distance until he proved to be trustworthy. John entered the kitchen, bringing with him an aura of security and comfort. "Is everything okay, Emily?" he asked, his voice low and filled with concern. "Yes, I'm just thinking," she replied, trying to hide the turmoil of emotions inside her. "I know it's difficult, but we're doing everything we can to keep you both safe," John said, approaching and placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Emily smiled gratefully, but before she could respond, John's phone rang. He answered quickly, his expression turning serious. Emily felt a chill down her spine seeing him like this. "I understand. I'll check immediately," John said, hanging up and looking at Emily. "We need to talk." It seems Mark was spotted near the hotel earlier today. Emily's heart raced. What was he doing there? "We don't know yet, but we're increasing security," John assured her, trying to calm her down. The following days were filled with tension. Mark's presence in the vicinity heightened the sense of danger, and John took additional measures to ensure Emily and the baby's safety. More guards were hired, and security measures were reinforced at the mansion and the hotel. Emily tried to focus on her work, but Mark's shadow was always present, a constant reminder of the threat. One night, while Emily was in the baby's room, she heard a noise coming from downstairs. Her heart pounded, and she ran to see what was happening. John was in the living room, arguing with one of the security guards. "He was trying to get in through the back door," the guard reported, his expression stern. "Who?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. "Mark," John replied, his face grim. "He's been detained, and the police are on their way." Emily felt a mix of relief and fear. Mark was becoming increasingly bold, and it terrified her. John approached her, holding her hands. "We'll get through this, Emily. I won't let him hurt you or our son." John's voice was firm and determined. The police arrived and took Mark into custody, but the incident had a profound impact. Emily knew she needed to make a definitive decision about the future of her son and her own safety. That night, sitting by the fireplace with John, she finally spoke. "John, I'm scared. I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. John squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Emily. We'll face this together. But you need to decide what's best for you and your son." Emily looked at him, seeing the sincerity and care in his eyes. She knew the decision wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she couldn't continue living in fear. John was a constant and secure presence in her life, something she had never had before. I want Mark to stay away from us. I can't risk my son's safety," she said finally, feeling a sense of relief as she made the decision. John smiled, squeezing her hand. "We'll make sure of that, Emily. You're making the right choice." With the decision made, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. John's presence by her side was a constant comfort, and she knew that together they could face any challenge. But the journey was far from over, and both were aware that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles and twists. In the days following Mark's detention, the atmosphere in the mansion was tense, but there was also a new feeling of hope. John and Emily were determined to rebuild peace and security in their lives. Emily continued to work at the hotel, dedicating herself diligently, trying to distract herself from the worries that still haunted her mind. One night, after a long day at work, Emily was in the mansion's living room, sitting on the couch with the baby asleep in her arms. The fireplace was lit, providing a comforting warmth that contrasted with the cold outside. John entered the room carrying 2 mugs of tea. He sat next to her, handing her one of the mugs. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft and full of concern. Emily sighed, looking at the fire. "I'm better, but I still worry about what might happen." Mark is unpredictable. John nodded, understanding her concerns perfectly. We're doing everything we can to keep you both safe. I've taken additional security measures at the hotel and the mansion. You don't need to worry about that now. Emily smiled, feeling a bit more relieved. Thank you, John. I don't know what I would do without you. John took her hand, their fingers interlacing. You're stronger than you think, Emily. I'm just here to support you. As they talked, their bond grew even stronger. Every shared moment, every look and touch, built a solid foundation of trust and affection. However, life continued to present unexpected challenges. One morning, while Emily was at the hotel, one of the managers called her for an urgent meeting. Feeling a chill down her spine, she headed to the meeting room, where she found the manager with a worried expression. Emily, we need to talk about something serious. He began, passing a folder to her. Emily opened the folder and found financial documents with several discrepancies. Someone was embezzling funds from the hotel. Her heart raced as she tried to process the information. This is serious. Who is doing this? She asked, trying to stay calm. We don't know yet, but we need to investigate discreetly. We can't let this leak out, the manager explained. Emily knew this added more pressure on her and John. They were already dealing with the threat of Mark, and now there was a traitor within the hotel. Determined to resolve the issue, she promised the manager she would do everything possible to help with the investigation. That night, she told John about the discovery. They were in his office, an elegant room with bookshelves and a large mahogany desk. John listened attentively, his expression growing more serious. This is more than just a financial problem, Emily. It could be someone trying to sabotage us, he said, thoughtful. What are we going to do? She asked, feeling anxious. I'll hire an external auditor to review all the transactions, and we need to be extremely careful. Trust no one but us, John replied, determined. The following weeks were filled with tension as the investigation progressed. Emily and John worked together, reviewing documents and keeping the situation under control. Their mutual trust and support became essential, further strengthening their connection. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Emily was in the mansion's garden, looking at the stars. The cold breeze caressed her face, bringing a moment of peace amid the chaos. John approached silently, wrapping a blanket around her. It seems like we'll never have a moment of peace, doesn't it? She said, trying to smile. We'll get through this, Emily. We've already been through so much together, John replied, his voice full of certainty. They stood there in silence, contemplating the stars. Emily felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Fear, hope, and a deep affection for John. She knew that no matter what happened, they would face everything together. The following days brought new revelations. The auditor discovered that the embezzlement was linked to a longtime employee, someone John completely trusted. The betrayal was a hard blow, but it also brought a clear resolution. John and Emily, more united than ever, took decisive steps to rectify the situation and protect the hotel. Mark's presence remained a constant shadow, but with each challenge overcome, Emily felt stronger and more prepared to face whatever came next. She knew that with John by her side, they could face any adversity and build a safe and happy future for her son. The following weeks were a true test of resilience for John and Emily. With the discovery of the embezzlement, trust in the hotel staff was shaken, and the atmosphere was tense. John and Emily worked tirelessly, reviewing every detail, every transaction, determined to eliminate any trace of betrayal. One night, Emily was in the office, reviewing documents under the soft light of a desk lamp. The mansion's silence was broken only by the sound of the baby sleeping in the next room. Her eyes were tired, but her determination was unwavering. John entered the office bringing 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of Emily and sat beside her. How's it going? He asked, his voice soft and concerned. Emily sighed, rubbing her eyes. We're making progress, but it's endless work. I keep wondering who else could be involved. John nodded, the weight of responsibility visible in his eyes. We'll find out, Emily, and we'll get through this together. He held her hand, a silent gesture of support that meant the world to her. They continued to work in silence, the presence of each other providing a sense of comfort and security. However, amidst the investigation, a new threat emerged. One night, while reviewing documents in the office, John received an urgent call from his head of security. "Mr. Stevens, we've found evidence that someone within the company has been passing confidential information to competitors," said the security chief, his voice grave. John felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at Emily, who shared his concern. "Who is it?" John asked, his voice firm. "We're still investigating, but it appears to be someone in a position of trust," replied the security chief. The news was a harsh blow. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming, but John and Emily knew they had to press on. They couldn't afford to lose control now. As the internal investigation deepened, the relationship between John and Emily continued to grow. They supported each other, finding strength in one another. One night, after a long day of work, they met in the mansion's garden. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky, and the gentle breeze brought a welcome relief. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Emily," John said, looking at her with admiration. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of emotions flood her. "I don't know what I'd do without you, John. You give me strength every day." They stood in silence for a moment, just appreciating each other's company. Emily felt grateful to have John by her side, someone she could trust completely. However, peace was always fleeting. One morning while at the hotel, Emily received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end was cold and threatening. "You can't hide forever, Emily. I'll find you and take my son back," said the voice, making Emily's heart stop. She felt a wave of panic and fear. Mark was far from giving up and was now making direct threats. Emily knew she needed to tell John immediately. She ran to his office, her heart pounding. "John," Mark called. "He's threatening to find us and take the baby," she said, her voice trembling. John went pale, but his expression quickly turned to one of fierce determination. "We won't let that happen, Emily. I'll increase security immediately and inform the police." Mark's threat brought a new level of tension and fear to Emily's life. Every day felt like a battle to protect her son and ensure their safety. John, in turn, did everything he could to reinforce security at the mansion and the hotel, but the constant danger weighed heavily on them. One afternoon, while at the hotel, Emily was approached by a nervous colleague. "Emily, I need to show you something," he said, leading her to a secluded room. Emily followed, feeling a knot in her stomach. When they reached the room, the colleague showed her a series of emails exchanged between Mark and one of the hotel employees. The messages revealed a plan to kidnap the baby and blackmail John. Emily felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The betrayal was devastating, and the imminent danger terrified her. She knew she needed to act quickly. She grabbed the emails and ran to John's office. "John, look at this," she said, handing him the emails. John read the messages, his face growing more serious with each passing moment. "This is serious, Emily. We'll inform the police and take all necessary measures to protect you both." The tension was at its peak, but John and Emily were more united than ever. Mark's threat was real and constant, but the determination to protect her son and herself gave Emily new strength. With John by her side, she knew they could face any adversity. The battle was far from over, but with each challenge overcome, the trust and bond between John and Emily grew stronger. They were determined to build a safe and happy future, regardless of the threats that arose. The atmosphere in the mansion was one of constant vigilance. Guards patrolled day and night, and every movement was monitored. Emily, although surrounded by protection, couldn't shake the fear that hung over her like a dark cloud. John, always by her side, did his best to reassure her, but both knew that Mark was becoming increasingly desperate. One night, while Emily was putting the baby to sleep, John entered the room with a worried expression. His eyes showed fatigue but also an unyielding determination. He approached Emily and hugged her, feeling the tension in her body. "We have a plan, Emily," he said, his voice low and firm. "The police are preparing an operation to arrest Mark. They believe he'll try something soon, so we're going to act before he has a chance." Emily felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The idea of a police operation scared her, but she knew it was the best chance to ensure her child's safety. She looked at John, trusting him completely. "I trust you, John. I just want this to end soon," she said, her voice trembling. The following days were filled with intense preparations. The police increased their presence around the mansion, and every movement was carefully coordinated. Emily and John were on constant alert, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Then on a stormy night, the tension reached its peak. Mark made his move, attempting to break into the mansion. Alarms blared, and the guards quickly sprang into action. Emily was in the nursery with the baby, holding him tightly, listening to the chaos outside. Every second felt like an eternity, and the fear was almost palpable. John was in the control room, coordinating with the police. He was calm on the outside, but inside his heart was racing. He knew he couldn't let Mark get close to Emily and the baby. "We need to catch him now," he told the head of security, his voice full of urgency. The operation was swift and effective. Mark was captured before he could reach the mansion. When the news reached Emily, she collapsed in tears of relief. John rushed to the nursery, finding her sitting on the floor, still holding the baby, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay now, Emily." "He's been arrested," John said, kneeling beside her and hugging her tightly. Emily sobbed, a mix of relief and exhaustion taking over her body. "I was so scared, John. I didn't know what to do." John held her face in his hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "You were incredibly strong, Emily. And now we can finally start living without this constant fear." The following days brought a welcome calm to the mansion. Mark's presence was no longer a threat, and a sense of security began to permeate every corner of the house. Emily began to relax, the tension slowly leaving her body. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but with John by her side, she felt ready to face them. The relationship between John and Emily continued to strengthen. Every shared moment, every glance and touch, solidified the bond between them. John, realizing the depth of his feelings for Emily, decided it was time to take the next step. One sunny afternoon, he took her for a walk in the garden, a place where they had found many moments of peace and reflection. As they walked among the flowers, John stopped and took Emily's hand, his gaze serious but filled with love. "Emily, I want you to know how much you mean to me. We've been through so much together, and I can't imagine my life without you and your son," he said, his voice full of emotion. Emily looked at him, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. "John, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us." John smiled, a smile full of tenderness. "You don't need to thank me, Emily. I want you to know that you are my family now." He kneeled, taking a small ring from his pocket. "Will you marry me?" Emily felt the world stop. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at John, the man who had rescued her from the shadows and brought her into the light. With a trembling smile, she answered, "Yes, John. I want to marry you." They embraced, their tears of happiness mixing with laughter. The future still had its challenges, but at that moment, everything seemed possible. With love, courage, and determination, they knew they could face anything together. The preparations for John and Emily's wedding brought a new breath of life to the mansion. The place, once shrouded in an atmosphere of tension and danger, now vibrated with excitement and happiness. The garden was being transformed into a fairy tale setting, with twinkling lights and flowers blooming in every imaginable color. Although excited, Emily couldn't completely shake off the fear Mark had instilled in her. But whenever these dark thoughts arose, she found solace in John's eyes, which conveyed unwavering confidence and deep love. One morning, while Emily was trying on her wedding dress, she felt a mixture of joy and sadness. The memory of everything she had been through made her appreciate that moment of happiness even more. In the mirror, she saw not only a bride but a survivor, someone who had overcome enormous adversities to get there. John entered the room, bringing a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "This necklace belonged to my mother," he said softly. "She always said it was a symbol of love and protection. I want you to have it." Emily felt tears welling up. "John, it's beautiful, and it means so much to me," she said as he placed the necklace around her neck. As the wedding date approached, a new challenge emerged. John received a call from the head of security, informing him that Mark had escaped from prison. Fear once again gripped Emily, but this time she was determined not to let it ruin her future. "We won't let him control us through fear," John said, holding Emily's hand. "We'll increase security and make sure he doesn't get a chance to come near you or the baby." John's determination renewed Emily's strength. They worked together to take all necessary precautions, coordinating with the police and the security team. John's love and support were her anchor, and she knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. On the day of the wedding, the sun shone brightly over the mansion. The garden was stunning, decorated with flowers and lights that sparkled like stars. Friends and family gathered, bringing an energy of joy and celebration. Emily, dressed in white, walked down the aisle with her heart beating fast, but full of happiness. John awaited her at the altar, his eyes shining with love and emotion. When Emily finally reached his side, he held her hands and smiled. "You look beautiful," he whispered, making Emily blush. The wedding was an intimate and emotional ceremony. As they exchanged vows, each word carried the weight of their journeys and the promise of a future filled with love and protection. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause and laughter. But even amid the joy, the shadow of Mark still loomed. During the reception, John received an urgent message from the head of security. Mark had been seen near the mansion. John's heart stopped for a moment, but he knew he couldn't let fear ruin their special day. He approached Emily, who was laughing with friends, and whispered in her ear, "We need to talk with security. Mark has been spotted around here." Emily's face paled, but she took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they went to the control room, where the security camera footage showed a man stealthily approaching the property's boundaries. "We need to catch him before he gets close," John said, his voice firm and determined. The security team acted quickly. In a well-coordinated operation, they managed to capture Mark before he could enter the property. When the news reached Emily, she felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "It's over, Emily. He can't hurt us anymore," John said, holding her in his arms. The reception continued, and the atmosphere of joy and celebration was restored. Emily and John danced together under the stars, the love they shared radiating in every smile and touch. Finally, they could breathe easy, knowing the worst was behind them. With Mark's capture, a new sense of security and freedom permeated their lives. Emily, now stronger than ever, was ready to start this new chapter with John and her son. They had faced danger together, and it had only solidified the love and trust between them. As the night drew to a close, John and Emily stepped away from the crowd, walking together to the illuminated garden. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky, and the gentle breeze brought a sense of peace. "We're just beginning our journey together," John said, looking into Emily's eyes. "And I'm looking forward to every moment with you." Emily smiled, feeling the same. "Me too, John. Me too." With Mark's capture and their wedding completed, John and Emily could finally breathe a sigh of relief and focus on building their life together. The mansion, once a stage for so much tension and fear, was now a home filled with love and hope. The garden, where they had exchanged their vows, blossomed with the promise of a new beginning. One morning, as the sun rose, bathing everything in a soft golden light, Emily was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. John entered, still in his pajamas, and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Good morning, Mrs. Stevens," he said with a smile that she felt on her skin. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of pure happiness. "Good morning, Mr. Stevens," she replied, turning to kiss him. Married life brought new challenges but also immense joy. Emily continued to work at the hotel, now in a position of greater responsibility, and excelled with her dedication and talent. John continued to manage his businesses but always found time to be with his new family. However, peace never lasts forever. One day, Emily received news that shook her to her core. The baby, who had been healthy until then, began showing worrying symptoms: high fever, incessant crying, and loss of appetite. They rushed to the hospital, where doctors ran a series of tests. Sitting in the waiting room, Emily held John's hand tightly, trying to hold back tears. Every minute felt like an eternity. When the doctor finally appeared, his serious expression made Emily's heart stop. "Your son has a severe infection. We're starting treatment immediately, but he'll need to stay in the hospital for a few days," the doctor said, trying to be reassuring. Emily felt a wave of panic. "He'll be okay, won't he?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're doing everything we can," the doctor replied. John squeezed Emily's hand, trying to convey strength. "We'll stay by his side the whole time. He'll get through this," he said, his voice firm despite the fear he felt. The following days were the hardest Emily had ever faced. Seeing her son so small and vulnerable, connected to tubes and machines, was almost unbearable. She and John took turns by the crib, holding his tiny hand, singing to him, and making sure he knew he wasn't alone. One night, while alone in the hospital room, Emily began to pray silently. Tears streamed down her face as she asked for strength and health for her son. John entered quietly and found her kneeling beside the crib. He knelt beside her, putting an arm around her. "He'll be okay, Emily," John said, his voice full of determination. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with tears and love. "I don't know what I'd do without you, John," she whispered. The baby's recovery was slow but steady. Every small improvement was a victory celebrated with tears of relief and gratitude. When they finally received the news that they could take him home, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere was one of relief and happiness. John and Emily dedicated themselves to caring for their son, ensuring his full recovery. The nights spent by the crib, singing and telling stories, became moments of bonding and strengthening for the family. However, life was not without its challenges. John received a job offer that would require him to travel frequently, meaning less time at home. Emily would have to handle the pressure of taking care of their son and working at the hotel alone. One night, while having dinner, John brought up the topic. "Emily, I received a job offer that could be a great opportunity to expand our business. But it would mean spending more time away from home," he said, his voice filled with concern. Emily felt a mix of emotions. She wanted to support John but also feared being alone to care for their son and handle everything. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "John, I know this is an important opportunity. We'll find a way to make it work. We can hire extra help, and I know we're strong enough to overcome anything together," she said, trying to sound confident. John held her hand, the relief evident in his eyes. "I knew I could count on you. We'll make this work, Emily. Together, we're invincible." The following months were a period of adjustment. John traveled frequently but always kept constant contact with Emily and the baby. Emily, in turn, found strength and resilience within herself, facing daily challenges with determination and courage. Each of John's returns was a moment of celebration. They embraced for long moments, shared stories, and laughed together. The bond between them grew stronger with each challenge overcome, and the house, once marked by so much uncertainty, now echoed with laughter and love. One night, after another trip, John returned home and found Emily in the garden, looking at the stars. He approached silently and hugged her from behind, as he had done so many times before. "I missed you so much," he said, kissing her neck. Emily smiled, turning to kiss him. "I missed you too. But every time we come back together, it's like no time has passed." They stood there under the stars, holding each other tightly, knowing they had overcome so much and were ready to face anything together. Their journey was far from over, but with each challenge, each moment of love, and each victory, they built a life full of purpose and happiness. John's travels became routine, and each departure was a mix of sadness and hope for Emily. She grew accustomed to being alone, taking care of the baby and managing the hotel. The baby, who had fully recovered, was a constant source of joy and strength. The house, once filled with tension and fear, now resonated with infant laughter and the unconditional love of Emily and John. One afternoon, while playing in the garden with her son, Emily received a call from John. He was in Paris for an important conference and had finished his duties early. His voice was animated, and Emily could feel his energy even through the phone. "I have a surprise for you, darling," John said with a mysterious tone. Emily laughed, imagining what he was up to. "What is it?" "You know I don't like suspense. Just wait. You're going to love it," he said before hanging up. That evening, while Emily was preparing dinner, she heard the doorbell ring. She hurried to open the door, curious about who it could be. To her surprise, John was there, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing a radiant smile. "John!" she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms. "Surprise!" he said, laughing. "I couldn't wait to see you both." Emily felt tears fill her eyes. John's presence was everything she needed to complete her happiness. They spent the evening together, dining, laughing, and sharing stories. The joy of being reunited was palpable, and every moment together was a treasure. However, their happiness was interrupted when John received an urgent call from the office. One of the hotels was facing a serious crisis that required his immediate attention. Emily saw the frustration in John's eyes as he listened to the news, trying to find a solution. "I have to go, Emily, but I promise I'll be back as soon as I resolve this," he said, with an apologetic tone. Emily held his hand, understanding the pressure he was under. "I understand, John. Go and do what you need to do. We'll be here waiting for you." John left, leaving Emily with a mix of pride and worry. She knew he was doing his best to ensure a secure and stable future for them, but the longing was immense. However, she stayed strong, focusing on caring for the baby and her responsibilities at the hotel. During John's absence, Emily faced new challenges. The hotel underwent a rigorous audit, and she had to handle the pressure and incessant questions from the auditors. Her leadership skills were tested to the limit, but she remained steadfast, determined to prove her worth and that of her team. One night after an exhausting day, Emily was sitting in the living room, reviewing reports, when she heard a noise coming from the baby's room. She rushed in, finding her son crying and agitated. She picked him up, rocking him gently and singing to calm him. Emily's heart ached to see her son so distressed, and silent tears fell as she cradled him. "It's okay, my love. Mommy's here," she whispered, trying to soothe him. That moment made her reflect on everything they had been through, from days of fear and uncertainty to the love and security they now shared. Emily felt a wave of gratitude for the strength she had found within herself and for John's unwavering support. When John finally returned, exhausted but relieved, he found Emily in the baby's room, reading a story. The sight of his wife and son brought a tired but genuine smile to his face. He joined them, sitting beside Emily and wrapping his arms around them both. "I missed you so much," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling complete once more. "We missed you too. But we're together now, and that's all that matters." The following months were a period of adjustment and growth. John and Emily learned to balance their responsibilities with family life, finding ways to spend more time together and appreciate the little moments. Each challenge they faced made them stronger and more united. One night, while sitting on the porch watching the stars, John held Emily's hand and spoke in a reflective tone. "We've been through so much, Emily, and yet here we are, stronger than ever," he said, his voice full of love and admiration. Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's because we have each other, John. Together, we can face anything." They sat there in silence, appreciating the peace and tranquility of the night. Their journey was far from over, but with each challenge, each moment of love, and each victory, they were building a life full of purpose and happiness. With John's routine travels and the increasing demands of managing the hotel, life was filled with emotional highs and lows for Emily. Despite all the challenges, their relationship continued to flourish, fueled by mutual love and support. Every reunion and every night spent together was a reminder of all they had overcome and how strong they were together. One morning, while having coffee on the mansion's veranda, John brought up a topic he had been contemplating for some time. The sun shone gently, and a light breeze rustled the leaves of the surrounding trees. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about the future," he said, looking into her eyes. "And I think it's time for me to take a step back from the business. I want to spend more time with you and our son." Emily was surprised but deeply touched. She knew how important John's work was to him, but she also knew that he was willing to sacrifice everything for the family's well-being. "John, that means so much to me," she said, emotional. "But are you sure? I know how important the business is to you." "Nothing is more important than you two," he said firmly. "We'll find a balance that works for all of us." They spent the rest of the morning discussing future plans, mapping out a path that would allow John to be more present at home while still keeping the business running. This decision brought a new wave of peace and happiness to the family. However, their tranquility was shaken when they received unexpected news. John's father, with whom he had a distant and complicated relationship, was gravely ill. John had never talked much about his family, but Emily knew there were deep wounds that had never healed. "I need to go see him, Emily," John said, his voice full of conflict. I don't know how it will be, but I can't ignore this. Emily held his hand, conveying all the strength and support she could. You don't have to face this alone, John. I'll be by your side always. The trip to John's father's house was filled with tension. The reunion was emotionally difficult. John's father, a rigid man who had always expected perfection from his son, was now fragile and vulnerable for the first time in his life. The initial conversation was tense, but as the days passed, the barriers began to dissolve. John spent hours by his father's bedside, reminiscing about the past and trying to find a path to forgiveness. Emily, for her part, took care of their son and gave John the space he needed to resolve his issues. One night, while John was alone with his father, the man looked at him with an expression John had never seen before: vulnerability and regret. I'm sorry for everything, son, John's father said, his voice weak and full of emotion. I should have been a better father. I hope you can forgive me. John felt tears streaming down his face. I forgive you, Dad, and I hope we can make the most of the time we have together. This reconciliation brought a sense of peace to John, something he had never experienced before. The return home was marked by a new lightness, and John was more determined than ever to be the best husband and father he could be. Back at the mansion, life began to adjust to this new normal. John reduced his travels, dedicating more time to his family. Emily continued to excel at work, now with the peace of mind knowing that John was more present. One night, while they were together in the garden, John held Emily's hand and looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We have a bright future ahead of us, Emily, he said with a smile, and we're going to make the most of every moment together. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. Yes, John, we'll live each day to the fullest. As they watched the sun disappear over the horizon, they felt a deep peace, knowing that despite all the challenges and twists and turns, they were exactly where they were meant to be together, building a life full of love and purpose. With the sun setting on the horizon and the gentle evening breeze enveloping the mansion's garden, Emily and John sat side by side, savoring the moment of tranquility. The baby, now a little older and full of energy, ran joyfully across the lawn, laughing and playing with his toys. John looked at Emily, admiring the strong and resilient woman she had become. Every line on her face told a story of struggle, love, and triumph. He felt a wave of emotion, remembering all the challenges they had faced and how each one had strengthened the bond between them. Do you remember how it all started? John asked, a nostalgic smile on his lips. Emily nodded, her eyes shining with tears of joy and nostalgia. I remember every moment, from that rainy night to now. Every difficulty, every victory, everything brought us here. They spent the next hour reminiscing about significant moments in their journey. The rescue on the rainy night, the early days at the mansion, the threat of Mark, the wedding, and most recently, John's reconciliation with his father. Each memory was a brick that built the solid foundation of their relationship. As they talked, a sense of peace enveloped them. They realized that despite all the difficulties, they were stronger than ever. John, who had always been a relentless businessman, found a new source of purpose and happiness in his family. Emily, who had started this journey as a frightened and vulnerable woman, had transformed into a confident leader and loving mother. Suddenly, Emily's phone rang. It was a call from the hotel. An urgent issue needed her attention. She sighed, knowing that her work never truly ended. John watched her, admiring her dedication and strength. Go ahead, dear. I'll take care of our little one while you handle this, he said, kissing her forehead. Emily smiled, grateful. Thank you, John. I'll be back as soon as I can. She got up and went inside the house, leaving John with their son in the garden. As they played together, John reflected on how much his life had changed. He had found a balance between his business and family, and he was determined to maintain this harmony. Inside the house, Emily dealt with the issue efficiently, demonstrating the same competence that had always impressed John. When she returned to the garden, she found John and their son laughing together, a scene that filled her heart with happiness. They spent the evening together, sharing a homemade meal and laughing about the small joys of life. The atmosphere was one of pure happiness and contentment. After dinner, they sat on the porch watching the stars in the clear sky. "You know, Emily, I think we've finally found our place in the world," John said, holding her hand. "I think so too, John," Emily replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And I'm so grateful for everything. For you, for our son, for this life we've built together." They sat in silence, appreciating each other's presence. Every star in the sky seemed like a symbol of hope and all the dreams that were yet to come. Life continued with its ups and downs, but John and Emily were ready to face anything together. Their lives were intertwined in an indelible way, and they knew that as long as they had each other, they could overcome any challenge. One morning, a few months later, John surprised Emily with some news. He had decided to spend more time at home and delegate more responsibilities at work, so he could be present for the important moments in their family's life. "I want to be here to watch our son grow, to support you every step of the way," he said with conviction. Emily felt a wave of love and gratitude. "John, that means the world to me. Thank you for always being by my side." They embraced, knowing that the future was bright and full of possibilities. Together, they had created a life full of love, hope, and purpose. Each day was a new opportunity to grow, learn, and love. And so, under the starry sky, with the mansion illuminated by the soft glow of the lights, John and Emily looked to the future with confidence. They had built something beautiful and enduring, something that would stand the test of time. In that moment, they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face everything together, with love and strength. Their journey was a testament to the fact that with determination and mutual support, any obstacle could be overcome, and any dream could become a reality.